So now we've got our second group, formerly known as Asset Mapping, and they've changed their name to Bright Future Network. They're going to be represented this evening by Sean Thornton. Bright Future Network proposes to unleash the power of information, giving residents and providers access to the resources they need to thrive. So Sean, you ready? All right, here you go. Good luck.
My name is Sean Thornton, and I'm here to talk about the Bright Future Network. Starting with a story, we are going to begin with Leah over here. Leah is a Chicago area single mother of two. She currently lost her job. In short, she's a woman who's in need of help. So what does she do? She reaches out to Mark. Mark is a social worker at a local nonprofit who is, in short, there to help Leah and people who are in situations like Leah. He does an intake and he finds the services that Leah is eligible for. Now, what does Mark use to connect Leah to the services she needs? This is Mark's binder, which is full of flyers, pamphlets, note cards, and other items that he's collected through his years on the job. Now, he's able to get Leah the help that she needs, but as you can see over here looking at his workflow, it's not the most efficient process. Not only is a lot of the information that Mark is giving Leah out of date, but he's only providing Leah with a small fraction of the available resources in the Chicago area, instead of taking advantage of the vast and deep landscape of services that Chicago has. Now, this is where our idea comes in and where my group's work comes in with the Bright Futures Network. Instead of having just a binder or a set of folders for information, what if he had an entire library of folders, which not only provided him information about all the resources in Chicago, but research and best practices so that he can sharpen his game when working with clients. And since it's 2015, what if I drop this analogy about libraries because it's really out of date, and instead talk about a more digital solution? There you have it. That's the Bright Futures Network, a current, consistent network of partners that helps residents map out pathways to self-sufficiency. Specifically, we're proposing an easily accessible online platform for the service sector, which provides comprehensive information and research available to people who need it, covering multiple discrete service areas and not just one. So how does this work? There are other efforts right now going on that are working to address Mark's problem. You may be familiar with other asset mapping initiatives going on or resource lists available on websites. But the catch with these services is, much like the nonprofit service sector in Chicago, a lot of these efforts are fragmented and siloed. They're operating within specific fields such as healthcare, workforce development, education, food, not lettuce, but food, housing, and other areas. Now, how do we know this? Because we've talked to many of these groups over the past couple months during this process. And what we've heard from many of them is that they're interested in taking their efforts to the next level so that they can help people more effectively. This is where our idea comes in, and this is where our network is unique. We plan to join these forces together to create a go-to portal for the service sector in Chicago, making Chicago's services as efficient and as effective as possible. So going back to our dear friends Mark and Leah, how does the Bright Futures Network improve their relationship and improve Leah get on a path to a better future? Instead of reaching for his files, Mark is able to log on to the Bright Future Network, and now, instead of having a small access and a small sphere of resources, he now has access to the entirety of the Chicago region's deep bench of resources and fields. Moreover, he has access to experts in the field who provide research on the best practices that he can do to intervene and work with Leah to help solve her problems. And lastly, he now has an opportunity to connect with other peers in his area, peers that are outside of his current network that he may not have connected with otherwise. The Bright Futures Network is able to provide a personal and meaningful connection between providers in a way that provides ease that no other current system has. What do we need to make the Bright Futures Network a reality? In addition to the partners we've already talked to, we need more people to come together to make this network bigger and better than ever. We also need someone to build the actual portal that would be easily accessible and easy to use for people throughout the Chicago area. Lastly, Bright Futures needs a home where it can be sustained and maintained throughout the process. Essentially, what our idea comes down to is that the Chicago area is full of hardworking individuals who have dedicated their professional lives to helping others. It's also filled with good people who are down on their luck and need an extra hand. In 2015, it should be easier to connect these two sides together, and the Bright Future Network may make that possible. Thank you very much.
Sean, you had me on the edge of the seat when you were like talking about binders for so long. I was like really worried that like we were just going to go like binder heaven or something.
Don't worry, it's 2015.
It's 2015, thank goodness. So these are your teammates?
Yes, come on board,
Welcome,
everybody.
you guys, congratulations. And I'll turn you over to your panelists. There you go. You guys can get closer to them. I know.
I think. Well, I guess either one of us can go. I'm going to go ahead and start. So it's a fantastic idea. Having worked in government for 20 years before I went into the private sector, you know, wherever the funders was going, what people did. And so you would find sometime in neighborhoods that everybody was in tutoring, mentoring, because the other funders were funding that. And it was like kind of craziness, because then there were all these other gaps. So this is a really great idea. I would think really hard about pitching somebody like IBM with their new Watson platform. They have done very little to socialize this beyond having and to advertise it beyond Watson Beat Jeopardy, but it's all about taking what's different about it is structured and unstructured data. So you would get both the information from the providers, the service providers, but you would get everything else crawling off of social. And the portal's the least of it because how you present it needs to be very simple. But they take really cool things. And if you go back to the people that you featured, the single mom of two, they do this piece of Watson, which would take her and map her to all her logical connections, whether it was school, food, housing, and what was available. And it's a pretty cool thing. They have a center here, a Watson center here, and you should reach out and you should tell them how good this would be for their business because they would be doing something really good and it could be very game-changing. Nobody's really done this well. Bits and pieces of it, but not great.
I think as well this is a very big idea, and if anything, I would want to encourage you to think a little bit bigger and to think particularly in terms of levels. How can you start smaller and then go big? So both, I give you comments on the line of sight and kind of how to start smaller. So from the line of sight, I think that access nowadays probably is not enough anymore. I think now the movement is towards predictive analytics, and particularly if you think about caseworkers, like what Indiana did, where they're now actually giving predictive, a tablet with predictive information on the case to say, based on the specifics of that case, here is what the best interventions are and how often you should go. So I think from a line of sight, that could easily lead to that. I wouldn't start there. From a starting point, I think you're starting as a mashup, where basically you're trying to collect all the information, so it's an asset mapping. And my suggestion would be that you're talking a lot about access and information. I would set the goal a little bit higher, that I actually can find solutions. And therefore, would think that the first step actually is to prototype and figure out the interface, because that's what will make Mark work smarter, is that he or she, whatever the case manager is, can find information quickly, the relevant information versus just a list. So that would be kind of my suggestion from the starting point. But I love the idea and I think it has a lot of legs.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely needed. There's no question. In fact, I think it will happen. It's sort of a question of when and how, because we're not going to have binders, right? We're not going to have libraries of binders. That's not the future. One thing I would think about is, as you're designing and doing a prototype, maybe reconsider who your user might be. So I think you presented it as the social worker is the user, right? So they are the user of the binder. They share the information with the person in need. If the person in need becomes the user, and you almost look at it as like almost like a Yelp for
Yes.
That's what
for people who need things. So instead of I'm checking the box for free Wi-Fi at a cafe, I'm checking the box for takes Medicaid at a clinic or something like that. This is what I need, and you can kind of serve a different array of needs. And then you empower the individual. You could have them even provide reviews and say like they provide good service or not, right? And then I think you can almost even rethink what the social worker's job is, right? If you free up their time from like looking up things in binders or on a website and vetting providers, they can do more of the like social work. I mean, actually like getting into people's lives and really helping them as individuals as opposed to being a conduit of information. And that feels really game-changing.
Yep. One of the things that this is a really good idea, and I'm agreeing that this is going to happen. The question is when and how. If you were to think about open sourcing it, right, allowing the community, because there's so much data and so many different verticals that this could spider into, the difficulty is how do you control all of that? And when you don't have the ability to control, I think that's when you kind of allow it to be opened up to the community and have each one contribute that. Because I may come across a great service offering, but it's not anywhere digital, so I can contribute and post it for the community to have access to. That could be valuable. Also, when there's so many different paths that you can take, I think the difficulty that you'll encounter if you try to solve all of them is that you won't solve any of them. And so finding one anchor vertical that you can really educate yourself on and allow the platform to be built around it, knowing that its applicability will transcend over into new verticals, I think that's going to give you that much more opportunity of being successful than to say, we're going to do healthcare, we're going to do social services, we're going to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So.
I would, I think, kind of add to something that I think Jessica touched on, which is that you have to decide whether you are aggregators of information or curators of information. And that's going to be, I think, a key thing for your clients. And whether your clients are the individual who needs the help or the social worker, if you're curating, you're really adding value. And aggregating is of some value, but I think not as much as if there's some qualitative dimension to what you're doing. And in a world of kind of crowdsourcing, if you build into your platform the notion of the clients possibly doing some sort of review or grading of their experience, that might help. And think of the difference between Craigslist and Angie's List. Craigslist is like you just kind of never know what you're going to get, and Angie's List is kind of vetted in some way. And the idea of Yelp as a model is also, I think, quite powerful, because I think if you do that, if you're able to do that, I think it would really add a lot of benefit and power to this notion.
I think I agree, and I think you have a choice. So are you Yelp, which is more focusing on the user and the access in a curated way, or are you Waze, where you're actually trying to get people to the end and show different ways? And that, I think the Waze model is more targeting the case study, the caseworker. I think the Yelp model is more starting the user. And I think they're related, but they have an overlap. But I think from a beginning point of view, you might want to have to
and
choose
it's going
one.
to, depending on which path you take, it will absolutely affect what you build, because you cannot solve both of those problems, simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental decision.
It's important for you to identify what strategy that you want to have going forward, because I imagine, again, the Waze versus Yelp, they will take you in a different path.
So you have to follow through.
Oh, and one last
There's two ideas.
suggestion.
You can break into two teams.
One last suggestion is to take a look at the Open Gov Hack Night events.
Yeah.
It could be a really great way to find socially minded developers that may want to contribute their technical abilities to this project.
Yeah. you might want to propose to IBM. I can introduce you that their hackers take it on, their developers on that night. Because you might get some really interesting ideas. You know, if they're profiling the person and their needs and they're willing to give the information, they can bring in the data of what the person needs and then try and connect that way. You could do some interesting things.
Great.
Thank you.
Up, guys. Cass, Howard, John, awesome. So, did I hear you right, Sarah? You said you were going to introduce them. That's great? And so, you're going to and.
I'm there all day tomorrow.
Okay, so you're going to introduce them. Jimmy, what are you doing?
I'm going to watch her.
We've got 4 more groups that you can volunteer for. I love that. It's like curate, make it bigger, and redefine jobs, all from having a dinner party, right? I'm amazing.
That's right.